Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's been a long time since I've made a chess video. I was just perusing through some games at the 45th Chess Olympiad from round 9, and this game caught my interest. This is from the match between Poland and the Czech Republic. With the white pieces, had Grandmaster Jan Krejci, and from Poland, you had Kasper Piorun. And this game caught my interest because of the unusual opening. So the game started out d4 from the Czech player, e6. And e6 is a very flexible move. You can end up in a lot of different openings here. You can end up in the French after e4. You can end up in a Dutch defense after c4. Benoni, Queen's Gambit declined. So e6 is a very flexible opening that can be used by players trying to avoid opening theory. Right, good for strong players to use. Game continued c4 in this case. Again, we have Dutch can be played with f5, knight f6 going into Nimzo Indian, d5, Queen's Gambit declined, c5, Benoni, and what we have here is b6, opening rarely seen at top levels, known as the English defense. Why is it called the English defense? Because in the mid to late 80s, you had the British grandmasters like John Spielman, Tony Miles, Ray Keane, Jim Plaskett, who actually made one of those old school VHS videos for Foxy openings called the English defense. And as you can see here, it is related to the Owens defense, and a lot of the themes are very similar. One of them is to, or the main object, if you will, is to attack in a hypermodern style white's huge center, controlling the square e4 primarily. Black is given, white is given the leeway to be able to build a huge center if he or she desires, but with the huge center, with the big center, becomes big responsibility in order to maintain it. And Black's argument in these hypermodern openings is that, hey, the big center is more of a liability than a positive, and White's argument is going to be the opposite, that hey, with the space and the big center, that I'll have more room for my pieces and I will be able to eventually increase my advantage and win the game. So this is the basic idea and concept, and of course both sides can be right. Right, there's arguments for both sides. So real quick, I want to show you an early game of the in the English defense between John Spielman and Susan Polgar, just to give you an example of some of the dangerous aspects of this opening from Black. Okay, here we go. So the following position is from Netherlands Chess Championship, and this game took place in 1993. Susan Polgar had the white pieces, and Jonathan Spielman, British Grandmaster, with the black pieces. So game d4, e6, just like you see here, c4. And instead of b6, we see an early bishop b4 check, which is also possible. But you'll see shortly the transposition here. Knight c3 was played, and now you see the move b6. So now we are in the English defense proper in this position. And so game continued. e4. So this is one of the early attempts just to basically refute the opening outright. Take the space, keep Black cramped, and crush black. So e4, bishop b7, and you can see the immediate pressure on e4. Black has to play very active in any type of hyper modern systems like this where you allow white so much space. Black has to be on the lookout for tactical opportunities and be very active, or else if white is able to consolidate, that center will be a problem. The space advantage will be a problem. So d5, just blocking the bishop off on b7. So this is one of the ways that you can deal with the fianchetto bishop that's committed early in the game, is block the the squares that block the diagonal that it's on. Queen e7. So again, there's pressure now down the e file, and notice where the white king is. So while white is making pawn moves, right, trying to hold up this large center, black is developing. Bishop e2, knight f6. Again, more pressure on e4 with the threat. And if e5, just simply knight e4. f3, again, another pawn move, trying to solidify the center. Again, with the big center becomes big responsibility to try to maintain and uphold it. Just imagine if you own real estate, right? Those of you that are homeowners out there understand that, hey, with owning a property, there's responsibility. You have to make sure that it's maintained, the grass is cut, right? The roof is not leaking, right? The pipes don't burst in the winter, right? You have to make sure that it's heated, make sure that everything is maintained. So think of the center as the home, right? The big home that you're trying to maintain. All right. So f3 is played. Now, of course, if white can consolidate and develop, he's going to have an advantage, right? The space is going to be stifling for black. And as you can see, as the pawn structure is set up right now, black can't really, move his knight develop his queen side adequately. Right? He has to play a move like, say, knight a5, knight c5, etc., because of the space, the wedge on d5. But watch how Spielman continues. E takes d5. C takes d5. So, of course, white is trying to keep things closed. c6 is played, continuing the attack on the center. D takes c6. Knight takes c6. Again, now look at the contrast and development. And white is losing the influence in the center. Knight h3, desperately trying to develop. d5. E takes d5. Castle. Model game in the English defense. All of black pieces are in the game except the rook on h8. White is behind in development. The center has been totally destroyed. Okay, save for the d pawn, and the d pawn is just a sitting duck at this point. There's no way that white can save it. So we can say that white center has been destroyed in hypermodern style, and this is a great example of hypermodern chess and attacking the center with the pieces. So we see the tides have turned. All the black pieces are developed, and except one, and white center is destroyed. Polgar plays bishop g5. Castle could have been played, but just then simply bishop takes c3, b takes c3, knight takes d5. And white is worse here. Bishop g5 is played, rook he8. Now all of black pieces are in the game. Black's pieces are in the game, and time to attack. Bishop takes f6, trading off the knight. G takes f6. Black, of course, plays g takes f6 so that he can maintain the rook and queen battery down the e file and pressurize that bishop on e2. Knight f4. Of course, Polgar wants to protect the bishop on e2 and perhaps even castle eventually. All right. So it's not just really to hold on to that pawn on d5, which is very problematic. knight f4 is played. If castle right here, again, bishop takes c3, b takes, and then just queen e2. All right. Queen takes, rook takes, get the piece back. But again, black is just better now in this ending. So knight f4, queen e5. This basic move, attacking the knight on f4, attacking the bishop, the knight on c3, threatening to win the pawn. Right? But who cares about pawns at this point, right? You can attack the king. So queen d2, protecting the knight. Bishop takes c3, b takes c3, and very powerful move from Spielman. Knight b3, exploiting the position of the rook on a1, and overall white's lack of development. Can't take the knight because of the rook on a1. So king e2, king f2. If rook fc1, this knight takes d5. Similar to what happened in the game. King f2, knight takes d5. So by the time Polgar gets a king to safety, the game is pretty much too late. It's too late to save. It's a wrap. Knight d3, and then just simply knight takes c3. Another piece attacking that bishop, and at this point, white just resigned. Game could have continued. Knight c3, rook he1, for instance, queen d4, and there's some nice continuations here. If king f1, then just simply knight takes e2, rook takes e2, bishop a6. Very powerful exclamation mark, right, of the power of the bishop, showing the power of the bishop at the end of the game. Another possible variation is king g3, and we can see now that open g file is going to be a killer. Tactics always prevail in positions like this. Easy to find, right? A lot of development, a lot of weakness on the board. You just have to look for the tactics, and they'll be there. Knight e4 check, f takes e4, rook takes e4, queen c1 check, right? Desperate move, king b1, and the idea is just simply bring the other rook to the open file. All right, so that just gives you an example of some of the tactics in the English opening. So now let's get back to our game, right? Please take a moment, hit that like button. Please subscribe to the channel. We'll start making videos again. I have probably about 700 videos on the channel. Just look. I probably have videos on the English opening too. All right, back to the game at hand, and shout out to my Polish people out there. Jak się masz? Witam. So d4, e6, c4, b6. Now that you had a chance to see what the opening is about, we can see here that Jan plays knight f3. A little more conservative and respectful approach, right? He just doesn't try to throw up a big pawn center, but maybe perhaps surprised by the unorthodox opening. This is a good surprise opening. You don't see it too often. Maybe he just wants to play conservative chess and positional chess and take it from there. So bishop b7 is played, g3, but the Polish player, Kasper, he is having none of it. He plays bishop b4 check, bishop d2, and then bishop takes f3. Gives up the bishop here. So he gives up this very powerful bishop. But in exchange, white has a somewhat compromised pawn structure. So again, these are contrasting ideas, right? You have the space advantage for white. Black has the superior pawn structure. And for now, white also has the bishop here. So the game is equally balanced. It's just that each side has opposing viewpoints here. So white is willing to take the space, has a slightly compromised pawn structure. Black It's a little bit cramped. Has a good pawn structure. So takes. Queen takes. Knight comes out. Knight c3. And now d5. So now black finally makes some noise in the center with his pawns. Exchange. And exchanges with the knight. And again, to point out once again, this battle between the pawn structure. So on black side, he has a superior pawn structure. And on white side, white has bishop still. And he has isolated pawn. And there's double pawns on on the F file. So this is black's compensation. White basically has more space. That's his advantage. But black has superior pawn structure. So bishop b5 check. And now c6. All right. This right here, it's just a positional move. It creates a slight weakness in the black position. And again, it seems like white is trying to be very patient and strategic. And his idea is just to create this slight weakness here and just basically attack down the C file and put pressure on this pawn. Bishop goes back. Knight goes back. And of course, he has to do this because the knight on b8 can't develop without losing the pawn. Castles. Castles. Fortifying the D pawn. Other knight gets out. And now here's the let the games begin, right? The pressure is being applied to the C pawn by white. This makes it hard for black to advance the move play the move C5. Black wants to play C5 here, but right now he is not able to play this move, right, and liberate the position. Because remember, black wants to destroy the white center completely here. However, if C5, then just bishop takes D7. Queen takes D7. D takes C5. And you go into this endgame. But this is favorable for white. Alright. So, black has to wait. Rook E7. And now H4. So what's going on with H4? Well, this is kind of tied into the principle of two weaknesses. And at this point, black has the C6 pawn adequately defended, right? The rook on C7, the knight on E7 adequately defending the C6 square. So white is simply trying to create another weakness somewhere across the board. And this is one of the things you want to do is if you have a space advantage, because the fact that you do have a space advantage, it's easier for you to move your pieces from one attacking point to the next, but it's harder for the cramp player to move his pieces in order to defend. So if you can create another weakness on the opposite side of the board, right, you can focus on one weakness and then suddenly switch. It'll be harder for the cramped opponent, right, who has less space to maneuver, to be able to defend that secondary weakness. As you get stronger in chess, you realize that you want to create dilemmas and trilemmas in the position, right? If you just create a threat, which is, like a one-move tactic, if you just create a threat, most players will be able to spot the threat and defend, right? This is not like when you first started playing chess and you make a threat and you look away from the board and hope your opponent doesn't see that his queen is hanging or something like that, right? Just a one-move attack that can be easily defended. As you get stronger, you have to make moves that create double and triple threats, right? Dilemmas and trilemmas. Because if you create a dilemma, now your opponent has two problems at the same time that he has to deal with. Hard. If you create a trilemma, three problems at the same time that he has to deal with, it becomes even harder, if not impossible, to defend. All right. So here, white is trying to create that second weakness, create that dilemma. So let's see what happens. So after h4, it's queen b8. Queen to g5, attacking the knight, right? The knight is under scrutiny now on e7. Just rook e8. And you can see black is playing, right, very close to the vest, keeping his pawn structure intact and just waiting for the right moment. White is doing the right thing also. Is utilizing his space, and he's trying to kind of maximize his advantages in the position. Because listen, if you take heavy pieces off the board, white has pawn weakness, right? This is great for black in some kind of potential endgame. So therefore, white is trying to extract his advantages now, or make the best out of his advantages right now. h5, and now h6 is played. Queen f4. Okay, the rook moves. d8. King g2. And now the knight comes back to f8. Rook c2. Another possible idea, again, on this idea of creating a dilemma, a second weakness, is g4. G4. Interesting idea. And that could be met by knight h7. Because the idea, of course, behind g4 is to play g5. This is one of the points I didn't point out. This is one of the ideas behind knight f8. Defensive move, so g4, that can be met by knight h7. So rook c2. So back to the other weakness. Now we have a5 here. And now a3. So why a5? Well, now I just want to point out that this will be a blunder, right? You can't lose patience, because after a move like rook dc1, right, piling up on this pawn here, there's simply b5, right? And there's nowhere for this bishop to go. All right, so now black is gaining space here. So white plays the move a3. Queen goes to a7. Now queen c1. And what happens is this move, queen c1, allows white to continue to pile up against the c6 pawn, and at the same time his rook keeps an eye on the d4 pawn. Now let's remember in all of this that white has weakness too, namely on the d4 square. Queen comes back, and now b4. A takes b4. A takes b4. And now rook c d7. And this is black's way of saying, hey, don't forget, you have weaknesses too. And so black says, I would love to trade my c pawn for your d pawn. No problem about this. Okay. Now in hindsight, rook d3, Probably a little better. It could be met by rook c8. All right. Again, in these kind of cramped positions, it's not much that black really can do. It's really, a lot of it is really just maintaining your position, and you're hoping and waiting for your opponent to make some kind of error. That's why a lot of these type of positions are not played with black by very, very strong players. And I'm not saying, of course, this guy's 2600. Of course, he's very strong, but you don't see it consistently, because these kind of positions can be, just pure torture, because what's happening is that your opponent with the white pieces is not making a mistake. He's just constantly making good move after good move after good move, and then eventually the position just cracks and you're left with some kind of end game weakness, and so you wind up playing the whole entire game without really any counter chances at all, and you just get ground down after 60, 70 moves, and a lot of players don't want to deal with that. However, every dog has its day, and bishop takes c6 comes. And it looks like just a simple situation whereby, okay, the c pawn will get traded, and maybe the game goes into, a drawish type situation. But let's see what happened. So knight takes c6 was played. Rook takes c6. And now, very strong move, f5. And what you'll see now is that this knight really doesn't have a good square to go to. All right? And that's really the problem. If black just plays rook takes d4, perhaps this is what white was expecting, and just trades rooks. Rook takes d4. Rook takes d4. Right, this pawn is under attack. So let's move it to b5. Right, nice outpost for the rook. And this position is not bad for white. I don't know what's black gonna play here. What do you want to play here? Rook d3. Okay. Maybe queen c4. This is a good position for white. Right? White has, again, space. He's blocked the queen action out. Eventually, he's going to play rook to c7. The knight is in a good position, and now the knight has a place to go. The knight can go to d6, at some point. However, by using this in-between move, right, this Zwischenzug, as they would say, this in-between move, it drives the knight to an inferior square. So now the knight is not going to be able to go to d6. Right? Now the knight has to go to an inferior square where he didn't want to go. If he goes to knight c3, you can see that the rook then will be captured on c6. Can't do that. Right? f6 is out of the question, and so is g5. So therefore he goes to d2. And what this does is create a bad pen situation. Now you have the two rooks doubled down on d4, putting pressure on the pawn on b4 and the knight. So now this immediately puts white on the defensive, and this is why that move is bad. That combination was bad. To play bishop takes a c6. Just wasn't the time. So immediately, of course, white wants to alleviate the pen. So he offers a trade of rooks, protects the pawn at the same time. So now he's on the defensive, and now black, after all of this time being cramped, springs into action, right? Like the cobra that's been coiled up, waiting, springs back into action with the counterattack. Black avoids this trade and puts more pressure here. Notice how the bishop is replaced by the queen on this very strong diagonal here. All right, this is good stuff right here. So now this knight can't really move because of the pressure on this pawn right here. So offer another trade. Now that's increasing the pressure. Now we have this it's like a variation of the old Alekin's gun setup, except that normally in the Alekin's gun the queen would be on d8, right? So here's a variation of it. Nevertheless, black is threatening to win the knight now on e2. The knight cannot move, so this is a bad position. So trades, but the problem still remains the same. The knight still cannot move. The rook still pinned on e1. Queen c7. All right, so now white is trying to exploit the fact that if the queen, say, tries to go to e2, for example, then white will be happy to just trade queens. Trade rooks. So rook d5 is played. Rook d5 is a good move because now the rook is supported, and now queen e2 is quite possible. Another move, rook d4 could have also been played. Gives up the pawn, and now queen e2. Now black is going to win the knight, and all white can do is hope for some type of counterattack or perpetual. But again, it's a lot of problems because of the pressure on the f2 square. So queen c5. So idea here is quite primitive. The idea is basically to play the move rook a8, and somehow in a perfect world be able to win this knight, and at the same time keep an eye on the f2 square. So it's understandable. I mean, what is white gonna do at this point? Rook f1 of course was better, but there's absolutely no counterplay in this type of situation, playing rook f1. So of course white is gonna go for the more active looking continuation, even though it's worse. So rook takes f2. I'm sorry, not rook rook takes f2. Queen c5, and now the knight just hops out. And the problem with this move here, which causes white to resign, is that there are no useful squares for the queen to go to. Right? The queen is protecting this square right here. So where's the queen gonna be able to go? That's safe. b6 is covered. If the queen goes here, right? Now knight e5 is played. So now another threat. And remember earlier I spoke about the creating dilemmas, right? Creating two weaknesses. Now the problem is now you have attack on f3 and f2. So how do you defend? How can you defend everything? Let's say you try to move like rook a3. Okay, now you create another problem. Now we got two weaknesses still. Now the threat is just simply to come to f1 with the queen and checkmate. And that's the game. You're not just creating one move threats. Now you have two move. Now you have a dilemma created where I have to defend two problems at once. So again, now how do you defend that? So now you have to defend, keep an eye on F3 and keep an eye on F1. So again, keeping up with the same theme, and that's really what this video is about, is creating dilemmas. More than one problem. Principle of two weaknesses, right? Now, in this situation, white defends this idea of queen to F1, right? Simultaneously defending this idea against F3. So he's holding everything together by threat and threatening to play this check right here, right? He would love to have a check situation. However, this move would end everything, because now the knight is attacking the rook, right? And not really, because again, the queen would just be hanging, but what it's doing is actually serving as a blockading piece. And now the idea of queen F1 leading the checkmate is just unstoppable at this point. Well, it's not unstoppable, but the queen would have to sacrifice herself, which would mean game over. And so we can see that, play queen, computer move like queen takes e6 or something like that. But again, the queen will have to sacrifice herself. So we can see that by creating more than one problem, eventually we can overwhelm our opponent. And this is what happened in this game. And this is why, of course, white resigned. White saw that eventually he wouldn't be able to solve all the problems created. See, as long as it was just as long as black was creating just one move threat situations, white was able to defend. Okay, you make a threat, I'll defend the threat. But once it became a dilemma, game was over. And so we'll just run through this real quick. So there we go, right? That's a one move threat. I'm not saying it's bad. This is how chess is, but I'm just making it super, super clear for just the newest chess player, right? It's a one move threat here, right? He takes care of that. He's not lost yet. Okay. At this point, there's no direct threat except the pawn on b4. So I'm sorry. So we could call, I won't say except. So there's the direct threat, right? So one move threat. It's protected, right? No problem. Here is not a direct threat. It's just pressure at this point. Just pressure. So white says, hey, I'm gonna use this moment to relieve some of that pressure. Now, right, a threat. What's the threat? The threat is against the knight, to win the knight. One move threat. How can we defend a one move threat? Oh, we just trade off. Now there's no direct threat here. Just pressure, right? Just lack of mobility from white at this point. Again, no threat, no direct threat, except, well, yes, queen takes b6, right, to win the pawn. But black doesn't really care about it, so we don't regard it as a viable threat. Okay. Their direct threat here? No, not yet. So now we can see it's a direct threat, but it's a one move threat against the rook. Rook goes here, and now he just gives up the piece. Now it's a threat against the queen. One move threat. Not a problem. And now we can see there's another threat. Just a one move threat. So therefore, it's only one problem. And we'll call it a problem, right? If it's just one move or just like one issue, we just say, hey, it's a problem to solve. What's the problem? Problems on F3. Problem solved. Now we got a new problem. Queen F1. Problem solved, right? It's one problem at a time. And now we can see right here, now it's two problems. One problem is the mating attack beginning with queen f1. The other problem will be to lose the rook. However, the main problem, the most important problem, cannot be solved. And that's what is meant by principle of two weaknesses. So this was a good game. Again, game was over. And great game. Who won let's see, I didn't even look to see who won the yeah, all the other games were drawn. So Poland, yeah, Mateusz won. Radosław won. And Jan Krzysztof Duda, yep. Draw. Radosław drew. And yeah, so this was the only decisive game between Poland and Czech Republic. So we can see that Poland won that match. So good game. Real simple, straightforward, unorthodox opening. And I hope you guys enjoyed that. Please support the channel. Click the links below, etc., etc. Love you guys. And see you guys on the next video.